So before we got to lunch, we want you to know this incredible person, awesome person. So let's make the screen appear. Can we make, okay. So hi, Mr. Alvin.
Hello. Nice to see you all.
Yeah. So Mr. Alvin, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Shoko. So my name is Alvin. I'm based in Singapore. I work for BNB Chain, and right now I am leading the ecosystem growth in the chain.
Okay, wow. So today, Mr. Alvin will present some of the insight about Web3 and Metaverse so we can learn more about these things from Mr. Alvin. Okay, the time and place, I give it to you.
Thank you. Well, it's a pity I couldn't be there with you all. I think it must be really fun to be in Genting. I also just heard that I am in between you and your lunch, so I probably wouldn't take that long. Make sure that you have a good time there. And also, hi to my colleagues who can see me on there. All right, so today I'm going to talk about potential Web3 and the Metaverse. And of course, all of us who are here knows that there is huge potential, right? But how big is that potential? How wide is that potential? I think this is something that I want to talk about. And also versus when we talk about potential, it's also about where we are today, right? Versus where we want to be. So we're going to explore a little bit about the state of where I think we are today in terms of the potential of Web3 and how wide it can be. But the first thing, right, is about what is Web3? What is decentralization? I'm sure all of you have seen this, right? Web 1 is read-only. Web 2 is a lot more interactive and participative, especially with social media. And then Web 3, every time you hear Web 3, it is decentralization. Now, words like read-only or interactive when it comes to Web 1 and Web 2 are very intuitive. But when it comes to decentralization, suddenly you see this very big word that's thrown out there and people don't really understand what it is. And I think that is also one of the reasons why Web3 participation or involvement is lower than what we want it to be, right? And you got to ask yourself, what does decentralization, what does it mean to you, right? I've heard two sides of the coin, right? Take Facebook, for example, right? Some people are saying, right, I don't really care if Facebook is centralized or decentralization. People may not care, right, if their data, their pictures are owned by one company versus them having it, as long as they can connect to people and they can continue to interact with their friends. And then there is another camp that says, what if today, Facebook decides to delete all your photos, right? And then the dark side of social media comes in. But a lot of people may say like, well, I don't think that will happen. It probably will happen only when doomsday comes or when it only happens to one or two people. So there is still this, we're still using very extreme cases to paint the picture of why Web3 is important. Now, when I think about how Web3 or how decentralization is important to me, I kind of think of it in very simple terms, right? For example, I like to use the notion of loyalty points or miles, right? All of us have maybe have credit cards. We link it to our air travel miles programs, right? We've taken air flights, and for me, I use Singapore Airlines. I use KrisFlyer miles. Now, there are people who really, a day in and day out, they go and look at what are the best deals, what are the best flights that they can get out of these KrisFlyer miles. There are lazy people like me who, probably only logs in once in a while. Sometimes my KrisFlyer miles actually expires even before I know, it is expiring. So what I would love to do though is if I'm able to sell my KrisFlyer miles to others, right? Because I don't use it as often. Now, the thing is this, right? Today, most of your loyalty points, most of your KrisFlyer amounts, they are centralized, right? It means that whether I'm able to use it or not, the flexibility of using it is not really within my control. It is with the company who has given me the points. Now, I would love a case where, whether it's your banking credit card points or whether it's my KrisFlyer amounts, that there are people who use it, that's fine. There are people who use it and they want more, that's great, right? But for people like me, I want to be able to trade it. And the notion of decentralization is this, is that you are trying to put all these points, all these things that you supposedly have into your ownership instead of them. And in that way, you have a lot more flexibility, right? For example, if I book 3 nights in Maldives in December, it happens that I can't use it because maybe I got COVID or something. Now at this juncture, I have to call the hotel to ask for them to refund, and I'm at the mercy of the hotel to be able to refund me. Versus if I own those 3 night stay as an NFT, I own it, and I can then sell it to someone else who has that, who wants that access because they couldn't book it for December on those 3 nights. Now you start to see that decentralization has a lot of benefits, and the biggest one to me is flexibility. That because you own it, you can do whatever you want with it. Whether you want to keep it, whether you want to gift it to a friend, whether you want to sell it. When you make things like this a lot more tradable, a lot more flexibility comes in for you. And to me, that's what decentralization is. So I would urge all of you to think about what decentralization means to you, right? Then you can tell the story of Web3. So we know, when it comes to Web3, there are a lot of different applications that may come in. I would say the bulk of the activities today are still in DeFi, right? We have seen GameFi come up since last year, August, right? When, Axie Infinity and all these games started to grow up like crazy, I would say. And now they are also kind of crashing in some ways because the tokenomics have not been sustainable. And then we saw later on Metaverse coming up, right? NFTs have been quite a boom over the last, I think, second half of last year to early this year. And we kind of term all these things into a term called MetaFi, right? Which is how do we use, the finances, the financial tools to actually enable all these other applications. But I would say even for MetaFi, like just gaming in Metaverse doesn't cut it because there's so many other applications that can come in. Think about all the lifestyle things that you do, right? Whether it's listening to music, whether it's going to a dance floor, whether it's traveling, or to the more boring, corporate stuff, whether it's legal services, whether it's a logistics supply chain, a lot of these can actually be impacted by Web3. And I'll show some examples later. So the question though is, if we look at all the blockchains today, right, the public blockchains, how far are we away from, the promise of decentralization across all these sectors that I talked about, right? Or are we still stuck in, the old days where DeFi, right, is still the main thing? And if DeFi is still the main thing, it means that, we have not really branched out to the other applications. I like to put it this way, right? Which is, if you look at a country's economy, obviously one key thing you would need to have is banking, right? Because banking and financial services allows other sectors, other industries, players to take loans, to put on credit, to do all these things in order to grow those sectors. So whether it's DeFi or whether it's financial services in the country, when you talk about an economy, the financial services always is an enabler to allow other industries to flourish, right? However, I do feel that in most of the public blockchains today, we're still pretty much stuck in DeFi, which is, it still remains as a building block, but these building blocks need to build the other sectors, right? And so the question here is, if we look at all these L1s, what is the breadth of the decentralized applications in each blockchain, right? I think if you look at, say, if you look at like Phantom, like Ethereum, if you look at a lot of this, I think a lot of them are still pretty much in DeFi. Some of them have branched out to maybe Metaverse and NFTs. For example, like Polygon is a lot on gaming and probably less on DeFi and other stuff. But still, we're looking at one or two sectors only. So how is it that we can grow to multiple sectors in order to fulfill the promise of decentralization across all the things that we're familiar with? I think we're still quite a while away. I think here we are quite I'm proud to say, I think BNB Chain or BSC there, it hasn't been renamed in this website that I got this picture from. So BNB Chain is today one of the most diversified blockchains actually. We have a very strong DeFi, right? Even though TVLs have been dropping over the last 2 to 4 weeks, but I think our market share has been increasing because we have a very solid DeFi infrastructure there. But at the same time, right, we have a gamut of games, which I'm sure LZ has shared with all of you yesterday. We have like Netmarble, some of the top publishers publishing their games on BNB Chain. At the same time, we have things like Move to Earn, we have Metaverse concerts. There's a lot of variety of things that you can do on BNB Chain today. And that's what we want. We want a holistic experience, not just, financial services. So this is something that I talked about, Metaverse concert, and it's going to go a lot bigger, right? And Quavo is one of the performing artists that did his concert together with Second Life, one of the metaverse providers on BNB Chain. I think I have a picture here. So this is how it actually looks. So on the concert day itself, you would go into this realm, right? There will be an enlarged figure of him. There would be screens around, and people will be dancing on the dance floors, which is pretty cool. So your ticket is an NFT, right? I have searched in some metaverse concerts, like the dance moves itself could be an NFT as well, which is pretty cool. But why the notion of Web3? Why the notion of metaverse? And the thing is this, right? If you look at the metaverse itself, it provides an interactive feature for people who cannot afford to go to that place for the concert, right? And you're talking about a lot of people, right? Whether it's in Asia, going over the US, and so on. This allows you to be in more interactive spaces with the singer or the performing artist that you like, right? Minus the travel. Now, with regards to NFTs and so on, right, it provides a very interesting use case where, imagine this, right? Say this is a performing artist and you've been to X number of concerts, or we know that you have been, attending their concerts or buying their NFT since the early days. The great thing about blockchain is that it's immutable and it holds the records publicly. So what it means is we have a transparent record of who are the earliest supporters of an artist, right? And if an artist later becomes big, right, they become popular and they decide to say, I want to reward my loyal fans. I want to treat them to an actual concert ticket in the future. Like all this can be done because these are all recorded on the blockchain. Today, can an artist know who are his most loyal fans from the start of the days? You won't really know unless they have deliberately joined like a Telegram group as early supporters. But there's no record of all these things, right, with regards to the activities that they've done. And this to me is one of the benefits of blockchain. We have GameFi, right? Lots and lots of different games, whether it's Metaverse, idle RPGs, AAA studios, pet breeding. The key thing is not, of course, the number of games or the type of games. I think the key thing is, what does an NFT do for you, right? Why is Web3 coming into GameFi? And this is one of the biggest disruptions I feel to games, which is this. Today, most of the skins, most of the weapons, the characters that you own inside, they are again centralized, right? And using the same example that I talked about when it comes to loyalty points and miles, what if I train my character to level 99, right? And I actually want to stop playing the game and I want to move on to another game. Now, you have put in so much effort to this and you want to be able to trade it, right? You want to be able to sell it. And this is not a new concept, by the way, right? If you look at, say, games like Magic Card the Gathering, actually a lot of collectibles cards, even Pokemon cards, right? The moment you get a very rare card, you want to keep it and you want to sell it later when the price goes up, because you take pride in the stuff that you own in this game. But in the past, right, you're not able to trade it when it comes to computer games. Finally, in the Web2 world, if you own a Magic card, like a physical card, you can actually sell it. But when it comes to the digital world, you realize that all this is centralized. Now, and so if you think about it, what we're doing is we're actually returning the capability that you were able to do in Web2. Just that when the software companies came, they centralized everything and you weren't able to do it. But now the games understand that NFTs are the future and it can return this capability to you as the user, as the gamer, and you hold the rights, you hold the power, right, to the stuff that you own. The key thing, though, for GameFi, as we have learned, right, they rose all the way up from last August to, I think, Jan or Feb this year. And in the latest, like last 2 months, I think a lot of GameFi have kind of crashed down to earth. And we wrote this article, I think, at the start of, actually in December last year, right, cautioning against this, which is sustainable GameFi, to play or to earn. Right, we hear this term play to earn, and it's been used so often in every game. Every developer is coming up to launch this kind of play to earn games. But the problem is this: when you have a play to earn game whose tokenomics are purely on playing to earn, what you get is a lot of people coming in not to play for fun, right? They're coming in to mine the game and to earn. What this means is, if you want a game to be sustainable, you are reliant on having more and more and more players coming on board, because then the first NFT they buy or the money that they pump into the game will help to sustain the rewards that are given out to previous users. Now, the moment the growth stagnates, right, we don't even need falling number of users. We just need the number of new users to stagnate. This is when the treasure trove of rewards cannot be distributed enough to the old players. And when they see that their earnings is less, and there's a new GameFi project that comes up, they will sell off everything and jump to the next project. So a key thing to solve for is how do we have sustainable GameFi tokenomics? And I feel that the only way to deal with this is to make sure that, right, you can have some people coming in to play to earn, but I think the majority of them should be here because the game is fun, right? And so what this happens is you're probably not going to see a really good play to earn like in the next half year or so, because good games needs at least 2 years to build, 2 to 4 years to build. Very likely what you're going to see first, right, in the next 6 months or so is maybe some of the really good Web2 games coming into Web3, right, and opening up their NFTs. While we continue to see, there will be some games that have been building for the last 2 or 3 years, and they will be launched on Web3 instead of Web2. So that could happen as well. On BNB Chain, I think we have some of these good games, like Era 7, for example, is a trading card game, and they've been building for the last 4 years, right? And so when they made the decision to launch, they decided, hey, it seems like NFT is actually a good case to solve a lot of this gamer problem. Let's launch on Web3, right? So I'm pretty bullish on GameFi. I think there's a real problem to solve here, but we got to take away those opportunistic players, right, and make sure that we have fun to play games on the blockchain. And then we move on, right, to move to earn, dance to earn, cycle to earn. There's so many of these that have come up. And again, the same issue stays, right? Is the tokenomics sustainable? Or is it just relying on more people coming in to cycle, more people coming in to move, and so on? However, this actually is interesting because I feel like it introduces another incentive for people, right? And for example, like I know Steppen as a move to earn app has crashed, but when I asked like friends who were using it and so on, it's interesting because they really started to move, right? They really started to go for runs, which they didn't have to. So there is something in there where it incentivizes people to move, to run, to exercise. But how can we do it sustainably, right? That's something we need to think about. But it's fine because all disruption happens, and there will be many waves of disruption to get the model right. And this is, I think, what blockchain is going through, where there's a lot of goodness coming through, just that the model has not solidified. And then we have metaverses, and metaverses is not a new concept, right? If you've watched Ready Player One, there's so many movies that have talked about it. This was not a term invented in blockchain. It has existed for a while, right? You can see here on the bottom left, this is actually by Improbable Metaverse, one of the best I've seen. And what surprised me is that, you see thousands of people there, and these are real people. It's high fidelity. You could actually hear people talking around you. I think not a lot of companies have got to this stage, but it shows us that this is possible, right? And I think this is like a 10,000 people going on a battle against another 10,000 in the metaverse. So it's pretty fun if you look at it. At the same time, you have the pixel metaverses on the top right? It looks really basic. It looks like a game that you play in the 1980s or 1990s. And so the most common question has often been, all right, so which do we fund? Which do we invest in? Which do we talk to? And my answer is always the same. It is not really about the graphics. The graphics are important, yes. But it's as good as saying, let's go to a restaurant. And would you always go for fine dining? No. There are multiple different environments that you want to be in, right? And each environment is interesting, right? I've been to retro arcade clubs, right? And it's fun, right? Even though it's not like a super posh kind of clubbing areas. But why? Why do you like being in such environments? It's because of the interactivity. As long as you can enjoy a good experience, as long as the interaction experience is good, whether it's a pixel metaverse or whether it's a high fidelity, high graphics kind of environment, you're going to enjoy it nonetheless. So metaverse is going to be big. We're going to see a gamut of different types of metaverses, as you can see here on two different spectrums. And NFTs allow you to own that character, own the things that you have in that virtual world. And what's more important is you're going to have multiple metaverses, right? So the ability to own is very important. Today, say if you want to port over your pictures from Facebook, right, and your connections on Facebook over to a new Facebook, for example, that is not possible because it's centralized, right? And what happens here is with multiple metaverses, I think there will come a time where it's all interoperable. And so you can get your character, your belongings, everything, and kind of move it to another metaverse, and that's fine, right? And that is why NFTs and Web3 is so important. The ownership gives you a lot more flexibility. In fact, I would say we should talk more about flexibility of ownership rather than decentralization. Now, this is correct. One of the music apps on BNB Chain, right? Another use case of Web3 that showcases the potential. And this one is interesting. You can think of it as crowdfunding, right? So today, a lot of early singers, early artists, they're just starting out. They don't have a lot of fans. They need just like a few $1,000s to get them started, right? To do some campaigns and get people to listen to their streaming, whether it's on Spotify or YouTube and so on. Now, they don't have the big budgets. They need to raise funds, but they want a place where their fans, where people can get to know them and fund their career early in their career stage. And this is what Corite tends to do, right? So it is a crowdfunding place where it allows fans to power these artists by investing in these artists' campaigns, and in turn getting an NFT, right? And this NFT would then give them their streaming rights, streaming revenue, whether it's on Spotify or YouTube. Part of that streaming revenue for that artist will come back to the fans that powered this, because they own the NFT. And so this NFT becomes like an entitlement, right? But also a record of their loyalty and their support for these artists in the early days. And then, right, when we have this foundation, a lot of interesting things can happen, right? Like I said, an artist can decide to reward loyal fans, right, from the start of their days. And that is possible because this is now transparent, this is now recorded on the blockchain. And also, you can say that, I want my streaming revenue to be, given to who have supported me in the early days. That's also possible because you have this NFT. So with regards to Web3 and music, I think we're going to see a lot of artists, right, really having the ability or the power to be able to interact with the fans in such a way where the fans now can power their artists in their careers, and the artists now have the ability to give back accordingly because of the public records. And this is huge. Of course, there's still many legalities and challenges in this industry. For example, owning the NFT, does it give legal rights, right, to the streaming revenue? So this is where legality and how NFTs versus the legalities of the streaming revenue, does it really tie in together? All these things have to be sorted out. And then we have sports, right? And lots of sports. If you see, whether it's like FTX or the rest, like a lot of sports sponsorships have happened in the last half year or so, right? I think Algorand sponsored FIFA, right? You may have seen like Cristiano Ronaldo doing something with Binance as well. Live sports is going to be huge because they have millions and millions of fans, and we want to bring them into Web3, right? But question again is, why Web3? So I always ask this question when I talk to a project first, right? Which is, why do you need to be on Web3? Now, not all businesses needs to be decentralized. Not all businesses needs NFT and Web3, right? But I think there's a huge thing that we can do for sports, right? And this is Wingcast, right? And a very interesting one where they have live streaming of sports events, and they want people to be able to own the moment, right? So in a case, you can imagine, I'm not too familiar with baseball. I'm going to use a soccer example. Imagine like this is the finals of the World Cup, right? And someone is going to take a penalty shot. And what Wingcast does is streams there. And just before the penalty shot is taken, it allows you to bid for an NFT to be able to own that moment. And so what's going to happen in the next 10 or 20 seconds, right, is going to decide the fate of who's going to win it. And you have the ability to own that moment through an NFT, right? Which is huge because, again, if you do it through a centralized way, you're going to own that moment, but only for one company. When the company goes down or is acquired or they disband that product, you're not going to own that moment anymore. And this is what NFTs are important for, because you literally own it. You have the flexibility of putting it anywhere you want. And we talked about World Cup fever. We have quite a number of protocols. This one is Top Go, that is on BNB Chain. And all of them, have kind of, started signing up these soccer players, right? Whether it's Alessandro Del Piero, Fernando Torres, they're all starting to come onto Web3. And this is important to note because it's not just us trying to promote Web3. There must be a reason why many of these stars, including Cristiano Ronaldo, is starting to release their NFTs, right? I mean, to be honest, like maybe some people may say it's for monetary reasons, but these people have a lot more reputation at stake, right? There is something in the NFTs, and that is the ability to interact with more people than they could before, that is driving them onto Web3. So I spoke a lot about different applications of Web3, but one key thing that I always want to remind people is, if you think of all the industries that are existing today, right, in the world, in the like world's economy, you have oil and gas, you have industrial, you have consumer goods, you have healthcare, services, logistics. There's so many different sectors out there. And most of the time when we talk about Web3 today, we're still pretty much stuck in DeFi, GameFi, and the Metaverse. But there is so many, like such a huge spectrum of industries out there that Web3 can actually disrupt, right? So the question is, what about the other industries that we need to do? For example, take the idea of supply chain. I think supply chain is ripe for disruption by Web3. Why? When you eat the steak that you have, right? Or, when you get the luxury bag that you have, you want to know where it's come from, right? And today you really have to trust the company that you bought from, right? Who's telling you, right, this came from the farm in this country, then it went through a sustainable process and so on. But none of this is actually publicly and transparently recorded, right? And people, we know in today's time, people are becoming more health conscious, and they're also becoming more sustainable conscious. They want to know exactly where this came from through every stage of the supply chain. And I know there are already a few companies that are acting on it, where you basically have a blockchain that tracks all this, because blockchains are immutable, which means if it went from farm A to farm D to manufacturing process C, and then to this distributorship in D, and so on, all the way to you, this whole process is recorded on a blockchain that is immutable, right? And you can actually log into an app to see all this progress as it comes to you. This, to me, is a huge disruption to supply chain, and it can establish a lot of trust between the brand and the consumer. So apart from that, right, so one is about widening the application of Web3. The other one then is we need to keep building and closing the gaps. And what do I mean by this? Right, for a metaverse to come in, there's so many layers of infrastructure that needs to happen, right? For supply chain, GameFi, there are a huge spectrum of infrastructural projects that we need to bring in, right? Think about Apple apps, right? Developing it in the early days versus developing it today is so different. Today, someone can create an app in a matter of days, but in the past, it could take months, right? Why? Because a lot of these infrastructural projects, whether it's like SDKs, toolings, APIs, are already here today. And so we need to keep bringing this into our infrastructural process as well as the map. So we are very early today, I must say. For example, look at DeFi, right? So this is the DeFi landscape. We have marked out certain segments. Now, those with solid line, those are what we consider strengths on BNB Chain. Those with dotted lines are what we call opportunities, where we feel there's a lot more. For example, payments, right? We need more and better payments players to come in, because with payments, then it would enable e-commerce players who are not on Web3 today to be able to accept crypto payments, right? And they may not have all the engineers that you want them to have, but if there is easy payment providers where developers on the e-commerce site can just plug in the SDK or API and just use it and just deploy it in a matter of like 2 to 3 days, right? That's what we want, right? But a lot of these payment providers are not here today yet. Same thing for security and insurance. We want more institutional money to come into our DeFi landscape, right? But the institutions, the banks, the hedge funds, the first thing they ask us is their insurance, right? Are we able to insure the hundreds of millions of dollars that we bring in? Because as institutional providers, they come in with big sums, right? And I think not a lot of people are willing to underwrite this risk today. So we need to continue talking to insurance companies to make sure that someone can underwrite that, right? Or when it comes to, say, asset management, because a lot of DeFi players today are still at the asset or maybe aggregator levels. But then what kind of structured products can you build on top of these DeFi protocols? These structured products and asset management are very mature in the banking and Web2 investment space, but still very new in DeFi, and we would like to see a lot more innovation coming in from there. So there's so much more to build. The last one is real world assets, right? I mean, we're starting to see some companies maybe underwriting like NFTs and stuff with real world assets like property or with gems, for example. But those are very far and few in between. Those are more like exceptions today. How do we make that into a more common thing? There's so much for us to build. All right, and then we talk about the metaverse, right? And this is not by me. This is by a guy called John Redoff, right? When he talked about building the metaverse, there are actually 7 layers of the metaverse. You'll be more familiar with the top ones, right? Which is the experience, the application of the metaverse, where you're able to go in the metaverse. You can buy things, you can sell things, you can actually play games or shop, right? Imagine a case where you go into metaverse, you look at an art that you like, and you can just click on it and buy it immediately, right? Rather than being redirected into a separate site to buy it. So those are the experiences. But if you go to the core of it, right, you'll start seeing like 5G or even 6G Wi-Fi, which may not be even here yet for most of the countries. And then you talk about wearables, right? Whether it's your headsets, your smart glasses, all the way to edge computing, 3D engines. There's so much that needs to happen, right, for this to come true. And then we talk about like MetaFi investments. This is our strategy of BNB Chain. And then you can see some of the segments that we highlighted, which we need to reach from 2 million daily active users today to 1 billion, right? And there's so many of them, whether it's DAO tools, right, DAO enablers to open NFT wallets. There's quite a number of infrastructure when it comes to NFT, DeFi, GameFi, and all those applications we haven't spoke about. We need to start building the infrastructure to invite and welcome these different applications to come in, right? And then finally, when we talk about infrastructure, it's also about the architecture of the chains to be able to support that. I think someone mentioned this before, which is if you take a really good game like Call of Duty and you make it 100% on-chain in terms of the activities and transactions, no blockchains today can support that, right? I think most EVM chains today can support up to maybe 300, 400 TPS. So how do we make sure that the blockchains today can support the kind of high scalability, high usage kind of activities and transactions? And this is what we have in mind, right, for BNB Chain, which is since the start of the year, we've been announcing our plans and we're going to go in this direction, where we now have, apart from the BNB chain that you're familiar with, now we also have the BNB side chains, where each game, each metaverse can start to have their projects built on the side chain so that it is dedicated to them and they don't have to share the bandwidth with the other applications. Because what has happened is we have seen like Solana going down, I think 4 or 5 times this year. We have seen like blocks rollbacks in Polygon. We have seen a lot of these things happening. BNB Chain, I'm proud to say that we are currently the only major L1 blockchain that has no downtime ever since we started almost 2 years ago. But still, there were periods of congestion. I think the last time we had this was last year in November, when the game spiked all the way up to 1 million daily active users by itself, right? So we want to prevent that. And how do we prevent these kind of congestions? How do we make sure that we are sustainable and operational? Side chains will solve it. We have already launched it. And so projects can start building on our side chain. And we're also going to have a ZK rollup solution by the end of the year. Yep. So all in all, we want to build the infrastructure, not just for DeFi and GameFi. We want to build the infrastructure for the whole spectrum of applications, right? From the fun ones, the lifestyle ones like move to earn and all this, all the way down to even the corporate ones, right? Whether it's for legal services, for logistics, and so on. And in the end, we want to be building towards 1 billion users on our chain. So thank you for listening. I know I've rambled on for the last 33 minutes, but do follow us on our official channels, especially Twitter and Discord. And I'll open up for questions. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much, Mr. Alvin.
Yes.
There's 2 questions regarding to today's presentation. The first one is, so far, how the metaverse and GameFi growth, and which category is the biggest?
Sorry, can you repeat it again?
Okay, so far, how the metaverse and GameFi category growth, and which category is the biggest?
Right. GameFi has definitely grown a lot faster than Metaverse. Um, I think if you look at the Metaverse, a lot of people know about like Sandbox, Decentraland. These are the famous ones, right? Um, but I think a lot of it is what you hear in the news, right? If you look at actual numbers of usage, right, you can go to the App Radar and all these to see the number of active users. I think the active users has not been like as great as what people want it to be. For example, like in Decentraland, I think a bulk of those users are still going towards that one game in Decentraland. So are people going in for the metaverse or are people going in for the game, right? So why I feel that's the case is because one, the infrastructure for allowing like seamless integration within the metaverse, I think a lot of it is still not ready. If you look at those like high fidelity graphics of metaverse, like wow, it looks so great, but a lot of them are still CGU today. It's not like actual. Whereas for games, it's easier to start with, and a lot of people have come up with it. However, I must say that the GameFi tokenomics that we've seen today is still not sustainable. So it's still going to be a long road towards what is sustainable GameFi.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And the second question is DeFi have a big ecosystem right now. So how the security issue being solved by BNB Chain this day?
Mm. It's a great question. Nobody likes to get rugged, right? Now there are multiple. It's not an easy topic, right? So there are multiple things that we need to look at, right? I think it starts from education. A lot of users today, right, when they do the checks, do they do the checks? I think that's the first thing, right? So very easy, right? You can go to the Discord channel, see who's talking. Does it look like it's botted? Do they have a lot of users? Are people talking about it? So a lot of users, they need to do these basic checks, right? Or even today there are quite a number of sites, right, like Go Plus, for example, or even Certic, where you can check for the security audits of these decentralized projects, or you can even key in the smart contract, right, for that project and see if this is safe or not, right? Because then the security companies will go through the smart contract and tell you, all right, maybe it has a backdoor security issue, maybe it doesn't allow people to sell, which has happened, right? People buy these tokens and they're not able to sell. Um, the basic checks needs to be there, so the users need to be educated, and a lot of them, I must say, maybe they even know it, but they still try to take a bet, right? And something happens later, they regret it. So we must start from that layer. Now, apart from that, though, we are also starting to invest a lot in like security APIs, right, to make sure that all right, we can easily plug in like the hot smart contracts that are coming up, plug them into these APIs, and try to understand which smart contracts are actually not safe, and then proactively warn users. So that's what we can do. But ultimately, still, blockchains are permissionless in most times. So in that case, then what we can do is to warn people and warn the projects. But whether the users still, in the end, invest their money in it, that's a different thing.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Afin. So if you guys have a question, you can send it to our committee and I will forward to Mr. Alvin and we will answer the question through your email. Thank you so much, Mr. Alvin. I hope
Thank you.
this moment is very uh, good for all of us, and the insight also can make us know a lot about the BNB chain ecosystem. Okay, see you on another event, Mr. Afin, and
All right.
goodbye. And can you say goodbye to everyone here?
Goodbye, everyone. Enjoy your stay in Genting. See you all. Bye.
Okay, thank you. See you on.
Such a great session. Thank you once again to